Welcome to the Opportunity Podcast, where entrepreneurs come to learn from real buyers, sellers, and industry experts on the lesser-known growth opportunities to build their online business empires. We'll uncover tactics veteran online business entrepreneurs have used to build, buy, flip, and sell their way towards personal wealth. Sit back, grab a coffee, and get ready to uncover hidden growth secrets. The Opportunity Podcast starts now.
And welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast, your go-to resource for hidden growth opportunities throughout online business. We're your hosts. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Sarah, and thanks for joining us for our latest episode. Today we'll be speaking with Mike Jackness, co-founder of Ecom Crew, a leading resource and community for e-commerce entrepreneurs. As an e-commerce expert and e-commerce business owner himself, Mike shares his perspective on the industry and his own experience buying businesses. He shares the ins and outs of due diligence, what to know as a first-time buyer, and growth strategies he used to scale his acquisitions.
That's right. We're really excited to have Mike on the call today, and he's going to share with us how you can grow with the e-commerce and FBA space and the current trends happening in e-commerce as a whole. And also, he's going to cover the biggest opportunity for e-commerce owners moving forward into 2021. But we don't want to give away too much just yet, so let's dig into the interview and see what Mike has to share. And at the end of the episode, we'll go over some of the best listings on the Empire Flippers marketplace that highlight the growth opportunities we've learned about here today.
Also, if you're loving the podcast or have any questions you'd like answered, leave us a review and we'll make sure to include your questions on future interviews. So, all right, now let's go ahead and get started. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast. Today we have Mike Jackness, co-founder of Ecom Crew, and we are so excited to have Mike on. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I guess the best you can be doing in COVID land. So I don't have COVID right now, and we're happy and healthy, and that's the best we can hope for.
Yeah, absolutely. Sort of the best things in 2020. Where are you calling in from?
We are in Las Vegas. We were just chatting a little bit before recording. We just bought a house here and settled down because COVID kind of forced us to do that. So Las Vegas is home now. Very
cool home. Yeah, I think as we were saying before, not somewhere I've been yet, but it's on my list. Hopefully when I get back to the States at some point, make it through. But so let's sort of kick this off. Obviously, we've talked a little bit prior to this recording. Not everyone is going to know as much about you. Can you walk me through your background and a bit about Ecom Crew for those who don't know you?
Sure. My background, as I get older, this conversation gets longer. It used to be, I did one thing and that was it. But I'll try to do the quick version. I started doing my own thing back in 2004, quit my day job way back then, doing affiliate marketing. And that was in the online gaming space. And when some of the laws passed with that, I got out of that and got into affiliate marketing in other places. I also started investing in domain names. One of the domain names I had purchased was treadmill.com. And at some point, the thought process of I want to be in e-commerce and that domain name kind of intersected. And next thing you know, I was selling fitness equipment on the internet. And that was started about 2013. And the rest, as they say, is history. And so you were mentioning Ecom Crew. Starting in about 2015, everything that we've been doing in e-commerce, we've been documenting the entire thing along the way. And one of the things that's made us unique is, to this point at least, we've been completely transparent about our products and our brands and the things that we've done right and the things that we've done wrong and how much we make, how much we lose, et cetera. Because I think it's important to not just pound your chest and talk about everything that's going right in the world in entrepreneurship. There's a bunch that goes wrong as well. So it's been a fun journey. We're 350-ish episodes or something like that into that since starting it and recording this. And we also have a blog and a community and all that over there. And just really enjoying e-commerce. I mean, we've had opportunities to go into something else and do other things at this point, but really enjoy the community and what we're doing. I found it to be very rewarding, and that's been fun 7 years or so, and maybe do it for another 7.
You were just saying there that you had opportunities to go in different directions, yet you stayed in e-com. So the question that came to my mind is why e-com? Because we talked to obviously a bunch of different buyers and sellers across monetizations, and everyone almost has their allegiance in a way to a certain monetization. And I know I talked to plenty of sellers who, let's say they're into content-based business and they're just like, oh no way, I wouldn't get to e-com. And then of course you get into the e-com space and you get maybe FBA sellers and e-com sellers who are like, I love this. This is my passion. So I'm wondering for you, why e-com, why stay, and why has that been the right move?
For me, it's all about the people. In the affiliate world, and I don't know that this is every segment of the affiliate world, but certainly the niches that I was in, it's very cutthroat. Everyone's trying to rank for like the same one term and would like run over their mother and then back over her again to get there. And not to mention what they would do to you along the way. And so, I found it to be just not a very pleasant business. You'd go to conferences and there just wasn't the type of camaraderie that there is in e-commerce because, again, everyone's kind of typically going to be in some sort of niche in the affiliate world, right? Like we were in online gaming, for instance, or web hosting or WordPress themes or online education or whatever. And there was a conference for each one of those niches and you'd go there and everyone was kind of like you're in some way. And it just wasn't a very pleasant environment versus in e-commerce. Yeah, you'll run across people who are competitors now and then, but it's like a multi-billion-dollar industry. You're never going to sell all the world's gel pens or all the world's gloves or whatever it is that you sell. And for the most part, if you're in a room with 1,000 people, there's probably nobody competing with you, or maybe there's one. And we've all been through the same things, the same trials and tribulations, and there's like this instant camaraderie. It's very, very different. It feels like a family feel or something. I don't know. It's cool, and I really enjoy it. And so I do think there's easier ways to make money, now that I've done all the different disciplines online. But for me, it's not just about that. I really do enjoy the people and the friendships I've forged in this little world we call e-commerce.
Absolutely. I mean, you're certainly the person to talk to on that, considering you've fostered such a strong community around e-com. And, obviously the people that we're talking to all the time tend to be more solopreneurs or almost lone wolves in a way where they might not always be looking at that community aspect in some of the businesses that they're running. So it's cool to hear that the human element of it all. A lot of solopreneurs might report on, this is how my business is doing, this is my experience, but they're not necessarily telling us about kind of what's going on with the community or an industry as a whole. Mm-hmm. As we were talking about that, I was thinking, I don't know if this is like an easy thing to do, especially with how insane 2020 has been, but is it possible to sort of sum up where e-com is sitting right now, what the industry is like at the moment?
Well, I think that, you said it's been a weird year, right? But there's been a lot of winners and a lot of losers, and e-commerce is on the edge of the graph of the winner graph, right? I mean, it's amazing to see what's happened in an already exploding industry. E-commerce has been up and to the right every year in terms of dollar volume and market share. And this year, it's profound. It's an outlier year. And I think it's here to stay. I think that what it's done is the last group of people that were nervous or on the fence about e-commerce. And I think about like grandparents type, people, or if you're older, your parents, people that are kind of over 65 that didn't grow up around the internet, were never really comfortable with it. They use it maybe in their daily lives here and there, but it's like, I'm not going to give my credit card online kind of people have kind of been forced into doing that. And also, I think along with that, have self-realization of this is a much better way to shop and live your life. I mean, especially for someone like me, I never enjoyed going to the mall. I never enjoyed really going out to shop. When e-commerce started, I was like, man, this is so much better. And now with Amazon and other companies like that, having stuff show up within the same day, depending on what market you're in, or certainly within 2 days, no matter where you're at, unless you need something absolutely right this second, it's like, why would you go out to the store? So I think that more people are kind of realizing that, to the dismay of obviously local retail. I'm not saying that there aren't losers here. E-commerce specifically, I think, is perched to have another breakout year. And I don't see it slowing down anytime soon.
Yeah, we just had an interview recently. We were talking about the changes of the industry, and especially with private equity swooping in and getting into the online space. It was with our director of marketing, director of sales, Alex Champagne, and he was basically saying there's been this shift where in the past 3 months, we've seen the same growth in online transactions that we've seen in 10 years. Mm-hmm. And it just shows you how fast the market can shift. And really, there is no going back. You can't afford to distrust your credit card on the internet anymore because you have to jump in. I like to think that maybe e-commerce is the unlikely hero in the COVID situation, where it's kind of swooped in and allowed people to have safe options, where it went from being the distrusted option, not distrusted, probably a generational thing, but this is absolutely what I need to do for myself and my community. So in a weird way, they're growing and they're experiencing this financial boom, but it's also shape-shifting how we do commerce, I feel like. I don't know.
It's not going to go back, right? I mean, because it's been too long. I mean, this pandemic, as of recording this, we're 9 months into this. And so it's way past habit now. This is not a temporary thing in people's mind where they can't wait to go back to the old way. I mean, this is now just the way.
Absolutely. It is. And in that case, as we sort of venturing out here, I try to get back to sort of the why we wanted to bring you on today. One of the things that we did want to talk about was obviously you are a believer in this space, you are a foster of community in this space, but you are also a business owner yourself. And so I know that you've had a journey of different acquisitions and different sales. And so we did want to take this chance to talk a little bit more about some of the acquisitions that you've done and go over just a deep dive of, how one of your choosing played out. So if you're cool with that, let's get into that. So with whatever acquisition that you have in mind, could you start me off with how you approached that and how did you get financing for your acquisition?
Sure. Yeah, we'll just do it chronologically. We'll start with the one that we're actually right in the middle of. So we'll start most recent. And so we're actually using an SBA loan for this particular one, which I think is in the category of opportunity of a lifetime. I don't know when this type of thing will come around again, but when you talk about the rates and the terms that the SBA is offering right now to go out and purchase an e-commerce business, it's unbelievable. It really is. And so there obviously is risk. There's a personal guarantee that goes along with it. But if you're comfortable with the business you're buying and you believe in e-commerce long term, I find the risk to be relatively low. And in life, especially in business, you have to take risk. Otherwise, you're never going to succeed. You don't want to take unreasonable risk or you'd be silly. But I think that this is one of these incredibly low risk opportunities of a lifetime. And so I'm excited for the transaction we're going through right now.
That's great. Yeah, we obviously are aware of SBA and we don't always hear people that are able to secure them for online businesses. But like we were talking about before, that shift where online becomes a bit more of, there's more comfort around it. I'm sure that's going to increase. So that's great that you're able to do that. So for the transaction that you're in, how did you approach due diligence?
So this particular transaction, we got lucky, or I would say we're fortunate in that we're actually buying the business from a friend, someone that we know in the community. We're just talking about this community in e-commerce. And because it's something that I made a conscious effort to do early through e-commerce fuel. This is just someone that I've known through that community that was ready to move on. She's kind of at the age where she wants to retire, and selling this business is going to get her to her number. I think we all have that number, right? So the due diligence process has been a lot easier than it has been in other transactions that I've been through. Typically due diligence is contentious in some way. It's always like this weird, jockeying thing where you want as much information as possible as a buyer, but as a seller, it starts to get old, having to get every little detail, and you have to be prepared for some level of that. And there's some level of respect, some middle ground. But in this case, because we knew the person, the process went super smooth, but we still went through it. It wasn't like, oh, okay, because we know you, we aren't going to get any information. And so the way that I approach it, first things first, if it's an S Corp, which this was, it makes it a lot easier because then you can just get the tax returns for that business. And if the tax returns match up to the P&L, it starts to make things a lot easier. Where things get more complicated is if someone is running it through their Schedule C, and they have a commingled business with a bunch of other things, it starts to get a little bit hairier. But in this case, it was a standalone S Corp, has its own tax returns. You can tie out P&Ls right to it. And then we do things like get access to Amazon accounts, PayPal accounts, Shopify stores, credit cards, bank account balances, and start just kind of going through transaction by transaction and making sure things make sense. So the way that I approach it is I take 2 random months. And so I go to Google and say, give me a number between 1 and 12. And I do that twice. And those are the 2 months I pick, just the way that I do it. And those 2 months I go through with a fine tooth comb. Basically every single transaction as if I was doing the bookkeeping for that month and tie everything back and make sure it all makes sense. And then for the other 10 months, I look at it at a higher level, just making sure that the big numbers match. And in this case, it did. It all tied out as close to perfectly as it can be. It's never going to be to the penny. That's the other thing you got to keep in mind. E-commerce accounting is kind of a little bit of lick your finger and put your finger up in the air and see which way the wind's blowing, because it is difficult to deal with your inventory balance to the penny. There's inventory in transit. You have cost of goods change along the way. You have things that just disappear, shrinkage. You have returns that come through. And so there's several different ways to approach this. Usually, there's some sort of reconciliation monthly or quarterly that kind of ties it all back. So it's never going to match the exact penny, but as long as it's within 1% or so, we kind of sign off on it. And that's the way that we approached it, and everything checked out good.
Great. Now I'm wondering, when you're doing this process, is this just you working on this? Do you have your team working with you on the due diligence process?
I'm the one that took the lead on it, but I did have a couple other people give me a sanity check on it. There's also companies that you can hire, which if we were buying it from not a friend, then I would have hired a company. I find it to be a lot easier to do that because it's somewhat like a lawyer, right? There's someone in between the process where you're not the one being the bad guy and having to ask for all this information from this person. And again, it can kind of get a little bit contentious sometimes. And so if you have a third-party company doing it, you can just blame it all on them. I prefer that, but in this case, we didn't have to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what they're there for.
Yep.
Well, how did you approach negotiations for this deal then? Because obviously you're working with a friend, so things might play out a little different. I'm wondering how you went through with that.
Yeah, we were just super upfront with them. And the number that we proposed to start with was the number that we agreed on. So there was no back and forth. And the reason that was that way is that we put up a fair price to start with. And basically said to her, like, look, she had like an asking price in mind that wasn't really, that was just kind of a starting point in the conversation. I mean, it wasn't realistic, but we or anyone would pay for it. Well, we went back to her and said, look, like based on these market factors and et cetera, we're willing to pay you this. And the number that we're proposing is meant to not be a negotiation. It wasn't set in a way where it's just like, take our number or leave it, because it wasn't the approach that we were taking. It was, we knew that we were offering a fair number. She probably wasn't going to get more. And just as much as we are enjoying working with her through this process, that goes two ways, right? I mean, like a buyer can be a pain in the rear end as well. And so I think that it's been a two-way street, and we were able to, again, just kind of go to her and say, look, like this is the most we can pay for this. And then we think that this is fair. We think that, if you want to go shopping around, that's fine. But, a lot of times in post LOI, you end up with like nickel and diming or BS, or it's closed. Like they want you to give you all this time, or they're just a pain in the rear end. And so there's more to it than just that. And so we knew that, and she knew that, and everyone, I think, was happy.
Yeah, it's really great that you were able to kind of finesse the deal in that way. And, having the deal being through a friend, I guess there's a little bit more that leniency behind kind of negotiations you can work out together with them just because it is a friend. Now, with this deal in particular, have you fully acquired the business, or it's still going through the process of handing it off to yourself?
Yeah, it's just going through the process right now where the SBA is, if anything, they're not fast. And so we're just in that waiting mode right now, but we're supposed to close in about 3 weeks.
No, it's great to hear that you're coming.
It's already been fully approved and all that stuff. And so we've actually already been doing work in the background as if we already own this business. We've already worked on hiring our team and, working on all the improvements that we want to make for this business, so where we think we can get more revenue and profit out of it. And so we're already working in parallel behind the scenes as if this is going to close in 3 weeks. And obviously nothing's guaranteed, but I would say it's as close to a guarantee at this point as it can be.
Yeah, it's really good. And so I'm also interested to learn from you, Mike. So can we take a step back for a minute here? Can we kind of just get an idea of what your entire portfolio looks like? If you wouldn't mind telling us, how many businesses you currently have or you're currently managing at this time, outside of Ecom Crew, obviously, on that.
Yeah, so we start chronologically from the acquisition to starting at the oldest one. So we had Tribmill.com, which I mentioned, which we have sold in January of 2015. At that same time, we picked up IceWraps.com, which we still own and still running, and it's a 7-figure business for us at this point. Then we started Color It, which we have since sold, which we sold for 7 figures. That did adult coloring books and supplies, for people that are adults that like to color, which is really big business that most people don't think about. There's all kinds of weird stuff out there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we have a baby brand that's some stuffed animals and hot and cold therapy. And we also own Tactical.com, which is probably our biggest project right now, which is kind of taking all the things that I've learned and putting it all together. And so we're kind of building a content business that is also an e-commerce business that's taken like a year and a half to kind of get it to the point that it's at now, but we're really starting to see results in a huge way, which I'm really excited about. And then the last one we're acquiring, because we're acquiring it with E-commerce Fuel Capital, been asked not to disclose the exact brand, but it's like a 85% Amazon business, 10% its own website, 5% other channels. The things that we see for this brand that we can do to make it better is just, I think that we can source the product a lot cheaper. The person that owns it has never inquired about sourcing offshore, which we're very comfortable doing. I think that we can make the website a larger presence for this brand. They've never really done any real SEO work, that's kind of our core competency. I also think that there's some employment costs we can save on because we have a big team in the Philippines. And so our hope is to buy this business and then make these improvements and resell it within the next few years.
Yeah, it's a good game plan to have, and you already have something set and quite a bit of experience as well, having acquired and exited several Amazon e-commerce business at the same time. But why don't you give us kind of a general overview, like what are some of the major changes that you'll make to a business once you fully acquired it? And that could be anything from launching new products or expanding the PPC spend. Why don't you walk us through like a step-by-step general guideline that you follow once you fully acquire a new business?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, you got to look for the right type of business, right? And so for us, we always are looking for a business where we feel like there's a knowledge gap where we're strong, right? So like meaning that the current owner or previous owner like wasn't very strong in the areas that we're strongest in. And so that's the first thing that we look for. Our theory basically is at that point we can come in and apply our secret sauce to hopefully some secret sauce that they had that we weren't maybe really strong in and get the biggest gains as quickly as possible. And so I kind of already covered a few of them, but like in this case, for instance, I feel like we're really strong with sourcing from China, for instance, because we've done that. We've been doing that before the pandemic. We were going over there every year and spending a month in Asia and forging those relationships and just kind of understand the whole lay of the land of importing. When you're first doing it, it seems overwhelming. And at this point for us, it's like breathing. It's like not even a big deal in any way, shape, or form. And so that's the first thing we're going to go in and just try to lower our cost of goods by 30%. So I think we can make some really big improvements there. Another thing that we've done is build an amazing team in the Philippines. I mean, we have, as of recording this, 17 full-time people there that are experts in several different disciplines. And so one of those is just graphics and video content, media, just the visual media stuff. And so we can go through and improve Amazon listings with better imagery, some sort of like infographic type content that's kind of popular these days with a lot of the images, add videos, they have their brand registered so we can add a video to every listing, put better enhanced brand content there. And our hope is that by doing all this, it'll improve our conversion rate and eventually improve our organic rankings and our sales. I also kind of mentioned our Philippines team. One of the great things about having them as well is that the costs are lower, so we can get more done cheaper than they were. And so those are some of the initial things. A little bit longer term things that we're looking at are adding SKUs. And so one of the things that the person that currently owns it, I mean, she sees lots of opportunity, as do we, by adding a significant number of new products. But she didn't really have it in her anymore to continue to do that. And she, as a good steward of wanting to sell their business, she was already thinking about that a year ago, which people should do. And so she wasn't really adding a bunch of new products. And I think that there's an opportunity there. So we're going to be doing that. And then the other thing that I mentioned is SEO for the website. So I think that just like we did with Color It, just like we have with Tactical, just like we have with Ecom Crew, I think that we can do the same with this brand and get to the top of the first page for a lot of really great organic keywords. And the good news is, even though she hasn't done anything with SEO at this point, for the bulk of the terms that we're looking at ranking for, she's already ranking somewhere between 7th and 20th. So basically bottom of first page or somewhere on second page. So a lot of the legwork has already been done. And this is a website that's been around for 7 years. And so, it has a lot of history and seasoning and the things that are important from an SEO standpoint. So I think that, someone like us, this should hopefully be a softball to get us to the top of the first page for the things that we want to be ranking for.
I got fixated on something that you said earlier. We were talking about your strategy is informed by, looking for your sort of leveraging your own strengths and, where your knowledge fits best. We've had a bunch of people come on and they've talked about doing the same thing. We definitely had a few interviewees come on and talk about how they look for flaws and that they love flaws in potential acquisition. For example, we had someone come on and was very passionate about inventory management. So when he saw something for an FBA business that had inventory flaws, that was his sign that all I have to do is fix this and get the product in people's hands and I'll be okay. So I was wondering, do you guys also do that sometimes? Do you look for flaws or do you have a favorite flaws in a potential, e-com or FBA acquisition that you think those are really good indicators of growth?
Yeah, absolutely. What I was alluding to earlier, I mean, I think that there's two different approaches to buying a business, or two different groups of people, I guess, that buy businesses. You have, let's say, investment groups, or there's a lot of them out there now that are kind of like looking to roll up businesses. They want the ones that are kind of like got the bow tie on them, right? That they're perfect, and they just want to keep acquiring them, and they want as little effort as possible to just keep building their revenue. And they didn't have someone that's kind of like the person you were just talking about, or someone like us, where not only are they looking to do that, but they're looking to get as much growth out of their investment. We're small compared to some of these billion-dollar roll-up fund type companies that are just going nuts out there. And so every one of these that we make has to be super impactful, and we have to get the most out of it. It can't just be like we're just adding incremental revenue. And so yes, we are definitely looking for businesses that have the most potential, at least in our eyes, for growth by taking what we deem to be our secret sauce and applying it. And for everyone, that's going to be a little bit different. But for us, it was kind of things I was talking about earlier. There's some other things that we're really good at, that we perceive to be good at. We're also good at email marketing. At one point we had 52% of our revenue for Color, it was coming from email marketing. And so we think we can do that with this business as well. They're not doing any email marketing. Facebook ads, we've spent over $1 million now on Facebook ads, and building email lists and just doing direct-to-consumer stuff with Facebook is another thing that we see as opportunity. SEO, again, listing improvements. You mentioned logistics. Some people are just really bad. It's tough, at keeping things in stock or optimizing their supply chain. And so I think that we're pretty good at that. In fact, our COO comes from a Fortune 500 company, and that was her job. So I feel like we're really good at it because, we hired for that knowledge gap because I knew that I wasn't doing as good of a job with it as I should be. And even though, someone like that is expensive to hire, when you're talking about moving millions of dollars of inventory per year, they can basically pay for their salary and then some. And so those are the things that we look at. And I think you're dead on. You've hit the nail on the head of you're looking for that knowledge gap to try to get the most out of the business as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really interesting to hear your perspective, especially as you sort of talked about, you have these accomplishments, that you guys have been able to do over the years. Like, you've spent $1 million on Facebook ads, you know how to build a good email list and content, and you bring in the right experts. I'm wondering, taking a step back, what kind of advice would you give for someone who is a first-time buyer? Obviously, you're dealing with first-time buyers in your community and around Ecom Crew. But, what advice would you give someone who is new if they're trying to get into ecom or FBA for the first time?
So I think there's two things I would advise on. First off, you want to be looking at the type of business you're buying and making sure that you're not falling into what I would consider to be a trap, right? There's a lot of FBA businesses that are for sale that are 1 year old or less. I stay away from things like this. I like seeing something that's seasoned, that has history. I also think that you want to look for things that aren't completely Me Too products. So something that has some level of defensibility. It's hard to find the unicorn business that has 17 patents and all this intellectual property, and it can't be knocked off in any possible way. Those things are very hard to come by. They do exist, but you can spend the next 5 years trying to find it and never come across it. But some level of defensibility, something that makes it more difficult for the next guy to copy than just going to Alibaba and getting the exact same thing that you have and selling the same exact product against you. And so we'll look for those things, something, again, that has history, that has defensibility, that has good margins, all the metrics, the things you're looking for are check marks kind of across the board. And when you start seeing things that are red X's, if you will, and you make excuses why you're going to buy it anyway, that's when you get yourself in trouble. And so those are things that we look for. There's always another business that will, no matter how excited you were about it to begin with, it's hard to walk away from. There'll be another business. So I think it's important for that. And then the second piece of advice I would give is you don't bite off more than you can chew on the first deal. There's a lot to learn through the process, and it's better to, if you're talking about a gun with 10 chambers, to fire 1 or 2 bullets on your first deal and save the other ones for all the things that you learn after the first one. It's just, I could sit here and talk for hours about the things that you will learn and understand and feel differently about after going through it the first time. And so I think it's important to just increase your knowledge base and understand the whole inner workings of an Amazon type business or an e-commerce business before jumping in off complete deep end of the pool, which I see happen, unfortunately, a lot. Part of running a community like we run, we see a lot of the good and the bad and the ugly. And the things that are usually ugly are people that didn't know what they were getting themselves into and realized that they were swimming in the deep end of the pool without a life raft after it's too late.
Yeah, it's a scary thing to jump into new waters and uncharted territory for the first time and not having necessarily your hands dirty in the work prior and learning that knowledge that you really ultimately need before managing the business on your own. And it reminds me that you just mentioned of an article I just wrote about how, there is no perfect business. Mm-hmm. You might find flaws in every little last thing, or you might see, something that could be improved upon, but there really is no perfect business. And ultimately, you shouldn't jump into it just right away just because you see one small opportunity without doing your due diligence and making sure that it is based on your business goals, something that'll pay off in the long end. Yeah, so I completely agree with you on that. And also, as you had mentioned, not biting off more than you can chew, especially when it comes to e-commerce. I'm sure you have this conversation with, your community a lot where they might be spending all of their money just on the business acquisition or buying the brand, but then they don't take into consideration, okay, the inventory, restocking that inventory before any of the profits are back in the bank. And then ultimately, if you have exponential growth in a short amount of time, that could ultimately also bankrupt a business because now you're going out of your own pocket to invest in inventory and stocking and storage fees and things of that nature.
Which I'm sure happened to a lot of businesses during COVID for sure. At least that's what we're hearing from our buyers and sellers. I'm sure you saw the same thing.
I mean, we went through it. Like one of the things you were just kind of talking about. I mean, we went through this pre-COVID with we were growing so fast that we almost went bankrupt. You can never have enough money for inventory, and you start looking for it everywhere. And at some point that you can't get your hands on anymore. And if you don't have a chair to sit down, that musical chairs game stops. You can get yourself in desperate situation. And so, I think that everything you just said is super important, right? I mean, and the other thing you mentioned, that there is no perfect business. I also completely agree with that. And what I also see people do is they're afraid to pull the trigger because they're looking for the perfect business. So it can go too far the other way where you just, life passes you by because you just never pull the trigger because you're looking for something that doesn't exist. There is nothing perfect out there. And at some point, you just got to say, this thing's 85% good and do it.
Yeah, good enough. That should be what you aim for, right?
Right.
Because ultimately, waiting for that perfect business, that'll lead to years of no deals getting done, right? So nobody wants that. Obviously, we want to be successful in this. So good enough is what you should really strive for. Now, on that subject, what do you feel are maybe some of the growing trends that separate e-commerce businesses from, let's say, a completely Amazon FBA standalone business? What do you think are some of the growth opportunities or maybe some of the growth trends that weigh in the favor of e-commerce sellers versus strictly FBA sellers?
Yeah, I think that the risk of Amazon continues to increase all the time. And so having an e-commerce seller that's channel diversified, either they're not selling on Amazon at all, or at least 50% or so of their revenue is coming from their own store, is what everyone wants, right? I think that it's funny that you mentioned this. Is like the question that comes up probably more than anything else, with Ecom Crew. It's like, how do I get off Amazon sales? Because people kind of sense this and know this, but not every business is set to really get off Amazon sales. You need some sort of a product that makes sense to buy off Amazon. It isn't a commodity product. And so I see this in our own e-commerce journey where with Color It, we could get a decent chunk of our sales off Amazon. It's the right type of product, but ice wraps, on the other hand, just does way better on something like Amazon. It's more of a commodity type product. I think that the trendy thing right now in terms of when you're looking at buying and acquiring businesses is that a lot of buyers are looking for channel diversification or a business that doesn't even have any Amazon component where the risk is perceived to be less. And so the risk with Amazon is binary, right? Usually, if you're selling and everything's fine, everything's going to continue to be fine until the day that it's not, where Amazon shuts down your account or suspends a listing for some reason, and you have to go through that pain, which I see happen, unfortunately, all too often. And so that's the thing that's scary where, if you have off Amazon sales, that can't happen. There's other things that can happen. If you have off Amazon sales, they're coming from some other place. Is it Facebook ads? Well, Facebook could do the same thing to you, right? And so, is it organic traffic from Google? Well, that could also happen there too, right? You can get a Google penalty somehow or whatever. So it kind of goes back to there is no perfect business. There's always some sort of risk. Hopefully you go into that with eyes wide open when you're buying business or starting your business and accept this. And, if you can diversify, obviously, if there was a perfect business, the perfect business probably would be it has 10 different channels that are all exactly 10% of sales each. So no one channel would ever hurt you. And you have 100 different products and each one of them is 1% of your sales exactly. And so if any one product has a problem, it won't cause you an issue, but that isn't reality. Reality is that you're going to have your home run channel, which is almost always Amazon these days, and you're going to have a home run product, which represents probably at least 30 to 40% of your sales. And, these are things that are hard to get around.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up that point. It's like Amazon, you really never know what is going to happen, in the sense that they could make this change and all of a sudden, got a listing shut down and you don't know what to do. But it's kind of twofold where you have that threat, but then it's the constantly having to keep above water to stay ahead of the algorithm changes or, what actually makes a good listing, what is actually good, your brand content and an optimized listing and things like that. In that sense, product development has changed so much over time that I'm sure for some sellers, it seems a little dizzying. Like, how do I really stay ahead of this? In light of that, how would you say product development in general has maybe shifted? And, what are the kind of things that you really need to keep in mind to get product strategy straight, no matter what changes kind of come your way?
Yeah, this is where we look for some sort of defensibility or intellectual property. Mm-hmm. And so I'll add one more thing in the mix for you that's even more fun is when Amazon comes and competes against you directly. An Amazon Basics product or one of their other brands, which we're dealing with right now with ice wraps, and it's frustrating, but it's not a defensible product, and it's not a surprise. Versus something like Color It, where good luck trying to copy it. It's all completely protected with intellectual property or copyright law, and so the more you can do that, the better. We keep this in mind with everything we develop. And yes, it might be more difficult. It might take us longer to develop a product. It might be more expensive. We might have to pay for molds or other samples and things that just take more time and money. But the harder you make it for the next person to copy you, the better. And that's something that we talk about all the time with what we teach at Ecom Crew, because the reality is that every business has this cycle, right? Where at first, like for instance, with Amazon, at first they needed us way more than we needed them. Yeah, we obviously needed them for a place to sell our goods and things like that. But Amazon was desperate. Absolutely desperate for third-party sellers to help build out their catalog, to help fill their warehouses, to just help Amazon grow. And, this I'm going back to, let's say, 2013, 2014, 2015, when you might be the only person selling an ice pack, for instance. And again, they just were desperate to have some that situation. Now, if you look at, how things have kind of progressed, it's the opposite. Like, they don't need us really at all, because now there's 10 people waiting in line that also sell the same product. So if you get suspended or you stop selling or whatever, it doesn't matter to Amazon. They're not going to lose a penny because there's another person selling that product. And so you got to be cognizant of where things stand, mixing into the fact that now Chinese sellers are more dominant player on Amazon than U.S. sellers, that factories are selling directly now, that Amazon is capitalism at its finest, trying to scoop up every dollar that they can, selling directly against the people that help get them to where they're at. This is, again, all things that happen in business. And so how can you project yourself out 2 to 5 years in the future and put yourself in a position where this doesn't hurt you as bad as the next guy? And having a more defensible product, having intellectual property interwoven into your product, or basically be your product completely, working on branding in a way that people will buy your product because they're looking for you. We had done a really great job with that with Color It. We know this because that was being searched a lot. It was actually registering as a keyword on a lot of the tools out there, and also on Google. Like, that was like a number one way people were finding us. That people would hear about our brand name because we spent a lot of time working on that. It wasn't just about, can I rank for a keyword like coloring book? We were working also on Parallel Universe on developing brand. And so the more you can do these types of things, the better off you're going to be, because 5 years from now, the people that bought our business are still going to be quite happy with it, because all that intellectual property will continue to be incredibly defensible. And people can go make another coloring book, but it won't be the exact one. Or they can go make another set of gel pens, but it won't be the exact one, because it is highly defensible.
Yeah, it's a very important note that you mentioned there, is building a brand for your product, not just necessarily launching products that could easily be copied. something I write about a lot, and Sarah and I both included write about a lot in our content is, building that brand, building a following, a community, you could also say, that knows you by name, that knows your product by name, and the quality that you provide is much better than someone just, again, copying your product over on Alibaba and selling the exact same thing. Well, if they don't have the brand or the name behind it, then people can kind of sense that when they're looking at those listings as well too. Now, we know, Mike, that you've been with Ecom Crew for a long time. You've had several people on your podcast, which is over 300 episodes now. And I'm sure you talk to many e-commerce sellers on a constant basis. And I'm sure you've heard almost every story in the book, I'm sure. But I'm curious to hear from you. So what type of prediction do you have, or what's the growth potential that you see for both e-commerce and FBA moving forward into 2021? Do you see more of these kind of startup FBA businesses coming onto the market, or do you see people trying to get away from the platform ultimately and starting up their own personal brand on a WordPress site and then having a Shopify store, or what the case may be? What is your take on that in the future moving forward into 2021?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to look just 1 year out, right? And so I think that without a doubt, you're going to see way more competition in the FBA space. Like, we are nowhere near a peak of that yet. I mean, there's still way too much opportunity on Amazon. Until Amazon has a year where like growth slows down a little bit, like it's going to take that before in a parallel universe, the FBA sellers also slow down. There's just so much opportunity still. Like, I mean, I still think that even if you're selling Me Too products, which I don't advise to do, I mean, there's still huge amount of growth potential, and it's easy. I mean, like, let's just be realistic in terms of, I mean, nothing about e-commerce is easy. I'm not trying to make it sound like you can go make $1 million tomorrow by just snapping your fingers. But compared to running your own e-commerce store, Amazon is an incredibly easy platform to make money with. I mean, you don't have to deal with fulfillment in any way, or customer service really, or getting the traffic and the eyeballs to the platform. Just as someone who's done all those things, I totally understand why so many people flock to FBA as sellers. So I don't see that slowing down, because a guy in his mom's basement can be an FBA seller, or a nomad. We're kind of talking about our lifestyles before recording this, and as people that have bounced around the planet all over the place, you can do this business from anywhere, any time zone, any time of the day. When you don't feel like working, you don't really have to. When you're ready to get some more work done, you can. If you're running your own store, things get a lot more complicated, because now you got to figure out fulfillment and customer service and returns and how to get traffic to your website. And while all that's great, and I recommend going down that path, if as a solopreneur, which we're kind of talking about earlier as well, this becomes exponentially more difficult, because now you're having to put even more hats on and juggle more plates. And in terms of FBA seller, I mean, anybody could start selling an FBA today. Like, literally, you can go down to like Target or Walmart. A lot of people teach this, kind of do retail arbitrage, go down and discount aisle and find some products and just start selling stuff on FBA literally immediately. And you send it in, and once it's sent in, you don't have to really do any additional work. This phenomenon doesn't really exist in other parts of the e-commerce world. I mean, when we were running Color for our own website sales, and when we had a 3,000 square foot warehouse and we had 3 full-time employees, and when something went wrong, I was the one that had to deal with it. When containers showed up, I would be the one out there in the parking lot, like offloading them. When we launched a new product or it was holiday season, I would be back in the warehouse, like also dealing with that. It was, difficult to travel and be gone for any lengths of periods of time, because, I just needed to be there for my staff, et cetera. That's a much bigger bite off the apple to chew. And so that's why that doesn't happen as frequently as a pure FBA business. And obviously you can use FBA to fulfill your Shopify inventory or a 3PL, and there's other things. I understand that. But even still, again, you got to now be responsible for more customer service and getting traffic to your website and other things that you take for granted with FBA. Reading the tea leaves, I see it becoming more crowded, more difficult. I see margins going down. I see Amazon, becoming a bigger competitor. I see more factories jumping in. And so I think that it's going to be more competitive and a little bit more difficult, but it isn't going to stop more sellers from flooding in.
So interesting to hear from you. I think there are plenty of sellers maybe holding on and going, gosh, I really hope there's a change. And all of a sudden, Amazon's going to become a little bit less competitive for me because I'm hanging on here. But like you said, there's just no sign of slowing down now. Amazon's way too big and they're not done yet. So that shift that'll one day happen, it'll certainly be a tectonic shift for the industry that would cause enough people to have to leave FBA. I don't know what that's going to take, but I mean, 2020 has been wild enough. I think we can just hang on and just kind of let things go as they are for now, right?
Yeah, I do think that Amazon will face challenges ahead. And in the court of public opinion, I tell you, man, it's strong and it happens quickly. I mean, I look at Walmart, for instance, where Walmart was like kind of like the darling for so long, back, I guess, in the 80s or 90s, maybe even before that. And at some point, they got this horrible reputation, which rightfully so. They got a reputation of like coming in and just destroying all the local retail stores and treating their employees like crap. And, they just got really bad reputation for that. And Amazon hasn't really had that happen yet. But I see that happening for two reasons. I see it happening for the cesspool that Amazon is turning into in terms of the product mix. Talking about more people descending into FBA, well, that means a lot more cheap, low quality, lower price stuff that just kind of drives the price to the bottom. And at some point, all the quality of the products suffer, and you end up with a bunch of crappy products that people just eventually get frustrated with. All the review schemes and the counterfeit products and et cetera that happen on Amazon. People lose faith in the platform. I am living proof of that. Like, I still buy lots of stuff off of Amazon, but I will not buy electronics or expensive items. Like, I'm not going to buy an Apple product or like a DJI product or a Canon product or a Rode product or, whatever, any of these electronic type products, because like, I don't know that they're actually real or brand new. I've been burned. Well, I shouldn't say burned because Amazon will take anything back, but burned in terms of wasting my time and just being frustrated. And so I just don't trust Amazon anymore for those types of things. I mean, if I'm buying paper clips or pens or whatever, like, no problem. I'll buy that stuff off Amazon. It's super easy and convenient. But if more and more people start feeling the way that I do, people lose faith in the platform and start looking at alternatives. I also think that Amazon's going to face challenges with the same thing that Walmart had with the way that they treat their employees and just the way that they conduct business. And so the more that this stuff gets out, because Amazon really is kind of like Mr. Burns and The Simpsons at this point. They're kind of evil in a lot of ways. And the more people that kind of realize that, it could make a shift in some other platform. And the only thing constant in life is change. And I do see at some point Amazon having to reckon with this.
Yeah, I think you're completely right on that front. And I don't know, I've definitely seen more media come out and report on how Amazon's employees are being treated. And if it's not in the media, it's almost everyone's got a personal story, because it's, you get the Amazon sort of crops up locations, especially around the holidays, and takes temporary and seasonal workers who odds are it's going to be someone or, through the grapevine, someone that they know. And then all of a sudden you hear the real stories, and that does shape your perception. And I think, at risk of sounding absolutely cliche, it's like, trust is the thing that's the most valuable here. It's the thing that you can't buy. And I think even though Amazon has benefited from being the leader for so long, I think there's going to be a rude awakening where, trust and decency, they might realize they might have undervalued that in their business plan, with how they've been going about things. So not to say that I want, down with the platform by any means, but certainly a betterment of the platform would be great, especially for all the people working for Amazon and people selling on it. Too many people could certainly having a better experience with the Amazon platform overall.
Yeah.
So this has been an amazing conversation, Mike. I've certainly learned a lot in the process, and it's just been great having you on. Normally we wrap things up with just a few rapid fire questions.
All right.
I'm kind of looking at my first one here, and I'm like, I think this one's tough to be rapid fire, but let's see. So what would you say is the secret sauce to success in e-com or FBA?
Wow, that is a tough one to do as a rapid fire.
I know. I'm sorry. I know you pointed to it a lot in your interview, but if there is a secret sauce, a high level thing,
I think that I can come up with a quick one. I think that you want to be looking where everyone else isn't, right? If you're selling the same thing everyone else is, doing the same thing everyone teaches and talks about, it's going to be more and more difficult to be successful. I look at the people who have been the most successful in my orbit, and it's people that are bucking the trend. They're not looking for the $30 product that fits in a shoebox kind of model. It might be things that are oversized or more expensive or have that defensibility type angle. And I think that if you want to be successful in like 2020 and beyond, 2021 and beyond, you need to be thinking this way, especially now. I mean, you might have gotten away with it in 2015, but it's going to be more difficult moving forward.
Okay, so great answer. I might have an idea about what you're going to say for this one, but I'll ask anyway. What are your top 3 tools, books, resources for growing an e-commerce business?
Well, number one is the book Traction. Talked a lot about it on my podcast. Just over the years, I really started to realize what was wrong with my businesses and just my management style. And so the thing that I love about Traction, right in the beginning, it talks about every business needs a visionary and an implementer, and they're never the same person. You can't be both, really. I mean, and so I started to really realize that I'm like that visionary type person, and I'm horrible at being an implementer. And so in terms of success, we've never seen more success than we finally hired for that role, and it made things way better. The second thing is community. Whether it's the one that I joined to begin with, which is E-commerce Fuel, require you to be a $1 million seller to get approved. There's other ones out there. I'm obviously biased. There's Ecom Crew, but again, very biased with that one. But any type of community. And you were talking a little bit earlier about being a solopreneur, just trying to grow your business or living kind of an island by yourself. That's difficult, right? I mean, and so being a part of something that's bigger than just you, I think is really important. And there's a lot of struggles you go through on a daily basis that if you've got someone you can ask a question to, it makes it that much better. And again, I would highly recommend checking out E-commerce Fuel. There's obviously Ecom Crew. There's MDS, which is $1 million sellers if you're a $1 million e-commerce seller. It doesn't really matter what community, as long as you find some place where you can develop a tribe and be with them. The third thing is managing cash flow. We talked about this earlier. Know your numbers, accounting. I would throw all this in like one big bucket. But the number one thing that I see happen, which is really sad, is people don't know their numbers. They think that, they look at their top line as like their success barometer. My partner with Ecom Crew, Dave, always says that revenue is vanity and profits are sanity. And I couldn't agree more. And so if you aren't doing a good job with your accounting, like stop everything you're doing and get that crap under control. Third-party services out there that can help you with it, or you can figure it out on your own. But there's a lot of moving parts in e-commerce, and accounting is difficult. And people all too often get to the end of the year or get through multiple years of their business thinking they're making money, and then realizing that they actually lost tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars because you never have enough money in e-commerce. You're constantly borrowing or using more money to buy more inventory as you're growing your top line revenue. And you might not really realize that you have a huge leak in your business. And I see this happen all the time. And so know your numbers, don't overextend, don't over leverage, and fully understand the dynamics financially in your business.
Yeah, the financials is definitely a very important one to consider with any acquisition or any business model moving forward. I mean, that's ultimately why we're doing this in the first place, right? So yeah, very solid point to bring up. And I'm sure listeners gain some great value to hearing your side of that coming from such a strong e-commerce background, and maybe give them that thought that they need to have, or the mentality that they ultimately need to have before jumping into a business acquisition, taking these things into consideration and really planning the execution for that deal as well too. So let's step away from the serious business talk for a second here. We know that you've been in the e-commerce space for a long time, Mike. We know that you've acquired multiple e-commerce businesses, exited multiple e-commerce businesses, and things like that. But we wanted to wrap up this final rapid fire question for you. So what has been the funniest or the weirdest moment that you've had during your career as an e-commerce business owner?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind actually is something that really doesn't have to do with e-commerce as much as is public speaking. And so the first time that I did some public speaking for e-commerce, just like how nervous I was, it's actually, I mean, this is making fun of myself, but I spoke at E-commerce Fuel, the community I was just talking about earlier, actually. They have a live event every year, and they asked me to come be a keynote there. And I had done everything I could to get away from doing this, because even though I was doing a podcast at this point and was comfortable behind a microphone, getting up in front of a room of your peers is actually quite difficult. And to me, it's funny just kind of looking back at it now, because now I do this all the time. Or pre-COVID, I was actually speaking all the time. Now I'm back behind the microphone again. It might be weird going out in person again just because we haven't done it in so long. But oh my God, I didn't get any sleep. I practiced all night. I had visions of me peeing in my pants or passing out in front of everybody, or all the things that
showing up on stage with no pants or something.
Oh yeah. I think that might have made it easier, because then they would have been thinking about something else than what I was talking about. But it was pretty comical looking back at now. And I think that it's just a good lesson in life. It's actually someone else has talked me into it, because I wasn't going to do it. I was adamant. And the lesson was that he told me, sometimes in life you got to do stuff that makes you uncomfortable, to get better, right? And when he said that, like a lot of things in life, sometimes you have to hear things in a certain way. It's not necessarily that profound, but it was to me in that moment, because I realized as soon as he said it, everything that I've done in my life that has been deemed successful by the world out there have been things that I just been comfortable with. Like you always gravitate towards being behind a computer and being the nerdy guy that's just like coding things up and doing things. And that's where I'm comfortable. And I'm not exactly the extrovert guy that like loves to be in front of a room with a bunch of people staring at me and hanging on every word. Some people love that, but it just isn't my thing. But forcing myself to do it, to get out of my comfort zone, forced me to do it in other things in my life. And be a public speaker and be able to communicate is a really important skill in life. Whether it's in a room with just one person or a room with hundreds of people, whether you have a e-com crew type business or not is immaterial. Being able to negotiate deals or friendships or things of this nature, fundamental things that maybe are crutches that you just didn't gravitate towards as a kid, has become a burden or a crutch in your older life. And so, breaking out and doing that was funny, but now it's been good.
I appreciate that insight. It's nice to see someone that you can look up to and has done so much in the space, but has been through some of the same things you've been through. Because I would have been the same way about public speaking. And I know I observe in myself, wherever I'm putting my heels in the dirt about something is probably the thing that I need the most. And so it's kind of that you need to do things in life that make you uncomfortable. So it's always nice to hear a bit of that human side with someone who seems perfectly natively comfortable in everything they're doing right now. And it's like, okay, they were scared at one point too.
I think the thing that makes it funny is like scared doesn't even, that's what's really, you had to be there maybe to really understand, but.
Oh, I do. I have severe stage fright. So I can empathize.
But I mean, like once you do it once, it's, the second time isn't as bad, the third time. And eventually at some point, like I'm never 100% comfortable. I always still get like the butterflies and get nervous or whatever, but I don't lose sleep over it anymore. It's just like, I'm like, okay, let's go do this. And once I get started, it's not going to be that bad. And, at some point you can get there, but the only way to get there, just like a lot of other things in life, is to take that first step.
Yeah, and we certainly hear that a lot on this podcast in particular, as we've been interviewing buyers and different experts. It's the issue of just start, just launch, just do it if they're quoting Nike. But yeah, it is that leap that you talked about. So this has been awesome. I mean, I've definitely really enjoyed this conversation, getting to know you a bit better and e-com crew a bit better. Certainly a lot to look forward to as things unfold these upcoming years for the space, but great to get a sense of that from you here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been a fun chat. Hopefully we'll get to meet again in person someday and get back to some sort of normalcy in 2021.
Absolutely. Future date in Asia, wherever else, and we can all get back in.
Absolutely. I think that I'm going to have to learn how to, drink and have conversations and have fun with people again. All these things we were just kind of talking about, you get used to being behind your screen and not being around people. It'll be awkward again.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think that'll be the next course to come out. How to re-socialize post-COVID.
Yeah, exactly. Reestablishing yourself in society.
Yes.
Yeah. If anyone has a business or needs a business idea, there you go. That's what you got from the Opportunity Podcast today. Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on. Certainly appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Hey everyone, as promised, now that we've wrapped up the episode and learned about building and growing your first e-commerce business, we wanted to connect you with some of our best listings in the Amazon FBA and e-commerce space. So first we have listing 48259. Which is an e-commerce business in the apparel and accessories niche. And what's great about this listing in particular is that it already has a trademark included and an email list, a big email list actually, of over 350,000 subscribers. So that's something that we don't really see very often here, having such a large email list. And it doesn't look like it's showing as it being monetized, or I'm sure there is probably other ways you can monetize that email list to increase the monthly net revenue as well too. So another great opportunity there alone, just in having that large of an email list. Also, what's included with this listing is the supplier relationship and SOPs and employee contracts. So you wouldn't necessarily be taking on a full-time job with this particular business, which is something that a lot of investors or buyers are trying to refrain from going into. And having these employees already in place and SOPs should make it easy should you have to scale your employees or your VAs, already having those processes documented. Another great opportunity with this business is that the primary traffic that comes into the website itself is from direct at 60%, followed by social 25%, and organic search 10%. So someone with a little bit of SEO background or maybe a little bit of knowledge in building out the SEO portfolio or maybe even gaining better ranking could also increase the traffic to this business and utilize that, lack in the organic side of the traffic source to really scale the business even further. Because social media is such a huge driver with traffic in this particular business, we should definitely go over what is included with social. So there's over 50,000 followers on Facebook and almost 850,000 followers on Instagram. So this is huge in terms of social media marketing potential, having such a large following and a large subscriber base already within these channels. Paid ads and social media are one of the biggest drivers for this business. And so the buyer has a little bit of ad experience, but then they also do have a freelance team, an ad manager, along with some designers when needed to go ahead and manage that role for you. So just in case you're not too familiar with social media marketing or maybe growing some of the ad campaigns or optimizing some of the ad campaigns, they already have an ad manager and a few designers on the back end ready to help you with that task. Currently, the seller spends about 20 to 25 hours per week on the business. So you do have a little bit of room should you have already, some other outsourced helpers that can come in and help you lower those hours. And then that way you can focus more on scaling.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I was quite impressed with the email list that you were saying there. Gosh, like 350,000. That's quite the achievement.
Insane. Yeah, it's a lot of people, that's for sure.
Yes, everyone's dream email list.
Right.
Well, so mine actually has a great email list and some other great assets to it as well. So we'll hop into it. So my listing is 49862. It's an Amazon FBA, an e-commerce business created in June 2013 in the supplements niche. So what I really like about this one is that it's in a strong niche, supplements. Certain buyers are really drawn to the supplements niche. And then, when a business comes around that's actually solid and it's really found its own footing in such a niche, it just makes it a really attractive acquisition opportunity. It's also really well positioned to go and operate even further worldwide. So the e-commerce side of the business is already selling worldwide. On Amazon, they're selling in the US and Singapore. So I think that is just already a sign that, if you wanted to get into additional Amazon markets, that's there for you. So another great benefit of this business in particular, there's a low SKU count. There's only 6 SKUs. So that's great. So, 6 strong SKUs that you only have to worry about. And then, I think really one of the best things about the business is it already has a loyal customer base who, make repeat orders for multiple products. This business has an email list of, almost 30,000. So, that email list is already driving a decent amount of profit. You've got a loyal customer base there, really just all indicative that this thing could just really take off. People who do love the business, they're already weighing in. They've left a lot of really great reviews already on Amazon. So that's, a wonderful asset to have in place. In terms of branding, the product pages are well designed. They've got all the sort of necessary branding elements in place without much oversight from a new buyer. And then something that's really cool that I thought this one was neat to have was that in terms of existing content on the e-commerce side, they've got content that has been written by experts in the space. So I don't think you get that with every sort of e-commerce brand. And the fact that you've got, real experts weighing in on supplements and nutrition, I think is just very much a selling point. And then this is really, really cool. Icing on the cake. There's already a custom formula ready to be launched should the buyer want to do that. So there's already a new product that the buyer could just take and run with. So I think that's excellent. I love seeing a business that has things that they can just easily pass on to the buyer and they can use that as their own growth opportunity. So really cool. I think we've got 2 solid businesses here that would make great acquisitions for anyone interested. So I think that just about wraps up this week's episode of the Opportunity Podcast. I want to say thank you so much for tuning in. We hope that you've gained some valuable insight to the opportunities digital acquisitions offer. Just make sure to click the link in the description or visit empireflippers.com/marketplace to learn more about these businesses or other listings currently live on the platform. And if you enjoyed the episode, be sure to leave us a review or leave a comment and subscribe to this channel for more great content that'll be released soon. Until next time, we're your hosts. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Brandon, and thank you so much for tuning in to the Opportunity Podcast.